This is making me think, I guess.
That is my intention. Hey everybody, my name is Natalie and I'm up here on Mackinac Island in Michigan. Now 300 years ago, this was the center of the fur trade in the Great Lakes. And back then the fur trade was considered essential to culture and the economy, and now it's a thing of the past. So in that same vein, we're out here talking to people about veganism, and we just had an amazing conversation with this young woman named Ruth. We talked about her Christian upbringing, morality, ethics, and connection to the earth. I think it's a really good one, so enjoy. So when I say vegan, what kind of words come to mind?
Healthy, like nature, like connected with the earth, and like passionate about, things of the earth and like plants and animals and the flora and fauna, I guess.
Yeah, so would you say that you're passionate about the earth and stuff?
Yeah, I definitely really care about like the environment and preserving what we have here, and I've been working towards getting my family to recycle, and I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So, and
It can be a battle.
yeah, for sure. So and especially being somewhere like Mackinac Island here.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, like I come here, I spend all summer here, and then I leave and I realize the difference that it is when it's like the air is cleaner here because there's like no cars, and there's less pollutants, and you leave and you don't realize how much there is.
So do you know much about like the impact that animal agriculture has on the environment?
A vague notion, but not like a whole lot.
Yeah, I really didn't know much either when I first kind of started researching this. But basically what I found through my research is that, when we think of things bad for the environment, we think of transportation like number one, and carbon emissions and flying and things like that. But animal agriculture is responsible for as much, if not more, carbon emissions than all of the transportation industry combined.
Wow.
It's crazy, isn't
Yeah.
it?
What does animal agriculture like include?
Sure. So it includes basically just the raising of animals. That's all animals. Of course, everyone knows beef is kind of the biggest offender, partially because of the methane gas. But it also includes, about like deforestation in the Amazon. Yeah, so most of that deforestation is driven by animal agriculture because they're burning down the forest to grow soy to feed to livestock.
Wow, I didn't even realize it was so connected. Like
Yeah.
deforestation, I knew about that and the dangers that is causing, but didn't realize that it's all a big circle.
Absolutely. That's kind of why I'm out here talking to people about this, because I feel like it's kind of been hidden from us. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, for sure. I think, and even like the idea of being environmental and caring about the earth, and it seems like the popular ideas about it is recycling and like eat vegan and be a vegetarian, but those sorts of things, like really digging deeper and like understanding the why and the what really causes why we do this, I think it's not as well known.
Absolutely. So do you think that you would ever consider going vegan?
Maybe I've thought about do it like at least started like vegetarian. I thought about it. Logistically, it can be very difficult in like my university. So at some point later in life, I might, and but certainly at least working my way there, even if it's not completely vegan, some aspects of that lifestyle incorporating.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think vegetarian is like a great way to start. There's a lot of problems with the dairy and egg industries. I don't know if you know much about those, but it's definitely a good start. 50% of vegans were vegetarian first. So does your school have like options for you, or if you wanted to go vegan?
Not really. It's a really small school, so technically, like every once, like they have to list it, if it's gluten-free or like vegetarian or whatever, but they don't really incorporate it like specifically if something that they make happens to fit in it, great, but they don't go out of their way to do vegetarian options, to do vegan options.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to like a supply and demand. Like if there aren't vegans or vegetarians there, then they're not going to like create the option in the first place.
I've had friends who have tried like going a week, going a month of eating, eating vegetarian, eating vegan, and they've had such a difficult time. And like you said, it's supply and demand. And
yeah, I found the past couple years have really expanded options. Like now there's Beyond and Impossible and that kind of thing. But I'm curious, like, do you like animals and stuff?
yeah, I have my cat myself. I've for the past many years I've had cats, and
Would you ever eat a cat?
no.
Do you think there's like a moral difference between a cat and say like a pig or a cow?
It's hard to label a moral difference, I would say. I think people have a different perspective.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think people who like grow up on a farm might have a slightly different understanding depending on what the farm is like. Because if you raise an animal from when they're very young and you name them and that animal becomes a pet, like regardless if it's a cat or a pig or a lamb or whatever it is, you're going to have that attachment to it. And so it's going to feel like wrong and like inhumane and immoral to go and like kill it and eat it. But so I think we get detached from that.
Absolutely.
It's someone else's cows and someone else's field. We don't have
And we don't have to kill it.
Yeah.
And that. Do you think you could kill an animal?
I don't think I could. I have friends who have raised chickens and they've talked about the process
Yeah.
and I couldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I see the place that I work has a lot of animals around, and so I see them around, and I just couldn't imagine watching someone just take their life.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely couldn't do it. Do you think there's a difference between killing it yourself and like paying someone else to do it? Like morally?
I think morally it comes down to being the same.
But it's definitely a lot easier for us.
Yeah, you're enabling that animal to be killed whether or not you are the one there present when it happens.
Yeah. How does that make you feel?
I don't know. I haven't like specifically thought about it as in depth like that.
Yeah, we're not supposed to. You know, it's kind of like hidden from us,
Yeah.
and it's definitely in our culture to like not question these things.
Yeah, I think we've gotten away from that. And a place like here that has a lot of history, it can bring you back to that and think, well, how did people live back then? And they had to be connected. And so I think if folks throughout history, if they did, eat meat and that sort of thing as well, they had a much more connected understanding of it because they had to be the ones to do it. And so they weren't as desensitized.
Yeah, there's this quote, I think it was like Paul McCartney or something. He said, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, we'd all be vegan.
Yeah, I've heard lots of stories about people, that they weren't vegan or vegetarian or anything like that until they went to a slaughterhouse, until they watched the movie.
Yeah, for me it was watching the footage. Well, I also, do you know much about like pandemics connected with eating animals?
I haven't heard much about it, no.
Yeah, so I hadn't either, but whenever COVID happened, people were saying, oh, it came from eating a bat or a pangolin. Now, they're not really sure. But I did more research and found out that 75% of pandemics are caused by eating animals.
Really? I didn't even know that.
Most people don't.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah, I think it's important to consider that when we support animal agriculture, we're not just harming the animal, but we're harming the slaughterhouse worker who has to do it and also increasing the risk of pandemics. So like you were saying earlier, it's all kind of connected in the world. I think that the risk of pandemics is like an important piece of that connection.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's certainly something that hasn't been brought up in the past year, especially like of any time to bring up that topic. This would be the time when pandemics are on everyone's mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's another reason we're out here doing this. Well, could I give you a card and maybe you could check out some documentaries or something like that?
Yeah.
Is that something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for talking. Any other questions you have for me, like any objections to being vegan or any good reasons not to, besides just the practical ones?
The only objections I can think of is just practical, whether it's logistical, like not being able to afford it because, if you don't make enough money to have the luxury to choose what you eat to that extent, because sometimes it can be more expensive depending on what you're
It can be, yeah. So I definitely thought veganism was more expensive, but when you go to the grocery store, the cheapest foods there are vegan, like the potatoes, the vegetables, the rice, tortillas, beans, all that stuff is really cheap. The expensive stuff, though, that I still eat because I like them, are like, the meat substitutes and
Right.
things like that.
Yeah, and I think that kind of relates to the other thing that I've always, one of the things that's made me concerned about it, and it just requires more research, is like the staples like iron or calcium or those things that you often typically get from dairy, from meat or whatever, and finding the alternative to still get those nutrients in while eating this other way, and that's something that I haven't researched much.
Yeah, so like let's say that you get iron and protein and stuff from like eating an animal. Where does the animal get those nutrients?
Well, now that you think about it, if the animal gets it from grain or from grass or whatever it is, then we could get it too.
We could get it from plants too, absolutely. But you're right, there are a couple things that vegans do need to supplement. The main one is B12. But B12 supplements are really cheap, and honestly, everyone should be supplementing B12, not just vegans. Like, most people are low in it, and the animals themselves are also supplemented B12. So you're getting a B12 supplement, whether you get it directly or through an animal.
Yeah.
And as far as iron, there's tons of iron-rich vegan foods: sweet potatoes, kale, spinach. Like, spinach has more iron than steak. You just, when we think meat or when we think iron, we think of meat.
Yeah, I think it's just a process of like getting used to it. Like, I know
Yeah, absolutely.
my family has done various other like diets of like cutting out all sugar and then like training your body to like burn fat instead of sugar.
Right.
And
It's definitely easier than cutting out sugar, I can tell you that.
And like at first it's really difficult, but then like at the end of it, my mom tried it, and by the end she was like, everything is too sweet, and it's like
Yeah.
you get used to it, and going back is harder because you're not craving that stuff anymore.
Absolutely, yeah, and especially once you think about the animals, like if you look at a burger, you would just see, or used to see food, but now I just see, like slaughterhouse footage or like an animal that wanted to live, and it makes me not want it at all anymore. So it's really interesting because I remember thinking like, oh, maybe I could go vegan, but like if, they delivered the wrong pizza, like I would eat it, but now the thought doesn't even cross my mind.
And just like a question, I know some people choose to eat that way because they're allergic to something in like red meat or whatever. Have you ever encountered that if people choose to have the vegan lifestyle, or however you phrase it, that if they go back, like their body has a negative reaction, like they will get sick from eating that?
I've heard that a lot. I've never, I'm not sure if it's true. I remember always hearing like, oh, if a vegetarian eats meat, they'll get sick. That may be true. It may not be. Part of me thinks it's not true because if you look at like how humans evolved and like how often people ate meat throughout history, it was much, much less than now. Like, I mean, in the Middle Ages, people would eat meat like once a month at most. So I assume that if they weren't getting really sick, then we probably wouldn't either. But I don't know.
Yeah, and something I just thought of, and I don't know how many people, I know a lot of people, because I was raised a Christian, and so I learned about the creation story and what the Bible talks about God creating the world, and something that that people have pointed out to me that I think gets brushed under the rug that might be significant for people who are Christian or identify as Christian, or however you want to phrase it, is that in the Bible it says that God created humans to not eat meat, and then later on he's like, you can eat meat, but like originally, so
The Garden of Eden, people didn't eat meat there.
like, if people didn't eat meat to begin with,
Yeah, well, I know this one
sense.
quote from the Bible that says that humans have dominion over animals, and to some people that justifies eating meat because we have dominion.
Yeah.
But if you look at it in a different way, dominion can mean responsibility, which would be the responsibility to
Yeah.
care for them.
Yeah, and if you think about if in the Bible God gave Adam the task of naming the animals, if he named the animals, would that not create some kind of connection? If you're living in
Yeah.
harmony with animals in the Garden of Eden, would you not want to? And so, whether or not people believe that, and it's still
It's
a
important.
concept to consider.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I think that a lot of people don't consider is that we're not just eating these animals, we're forcibly impregnating them and breeding them to have characteristics that are better for us, like they grow faster, certain parts of them grow bigger. So in a way, we're kind of playing God in that
Yeah.
sense. And to me, that seems very wrong.
Yeah, I know one part of my job, one thing, sometimes I get to talk about corn. It's a long story, but the point is, like comparing how corn used to be and then how it is now, how
Yeah.
people have bred it so that it always turns out perfectly. And then, so if you look at, heritage breed corn or whatever the terminology is for plants, and then how it is now, the plants are better if you get the original, the heirloom. Like, it's better.
Yeah, we've modified a lot of stuff, definitely.
Yeah. It's like if we've modified plants that much and it's more obvious how we've modified plants, have we not modified animals the same way?
What do you think about like if someone says we can eat animals because other animals eat animals? Do you think that makes sense?
I think it doesn't necessarily make sense in that way. Like, because we're different than animals.
We have a moral I would call it moral
Yeah.
agency, which means that other animals need to do it to survive, or they can't really act with morals, whereas we can. So that it kind of gives us a responsibility.
And whatever you believe, whether that humans evolved or they were created differently, regardless is we're different than animals.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we have a sense of morality and a conscience, and animals don't have that. And so
and it's
we could
also
know right from wrong and no,
Yeah.
it's not right, and animals might not know that. It might just be like kind of an instinct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that we do have a responsibility. But yeah, well, that's awesome. Any other questions? Or I feel like you've been super open and like great to talk to.
This is making me think. I guess.
That is my intention.
Yeah, I'm gonna think more about this.
Yeah, that's great.
I haven't thought about it much.
I know, because we're just kind of raised in a certain way, and I feel like a lot of kids don't want to eat animals, and then their parents are like, "Oh no, that's just like what we do." I mean, I don't even remember being taught to eat meat, but I know that I was. So
Yeah, I think kids, like, they have this innocence that they look at an animal and it's like cool to them.
I know. I mean, everyone loves animals. Yeah.
Like, would you kill an animal? Like, would you kill a lamb in front of a small child? If you
No way.
wouldn't, then should you do it at all?
Yeah, and it's interesting, like wild animals, teach their young to kill prey. But like if we see a kid killing an animal, then the FBI like puts them down as like a potential threat to humanity, because that's like a red flag for being like a potential serial killer.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, now you gave me something to think about.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I'll give you a card, and you can check out some of my other videos, and you'll be in one in a few weeks. So yeah, thank you so much.